When I first saw the announcement trailer for Oxygen Not Included, I had no idea what to expect. The trailer came out sometime before the early access release and revealed very little as to what the game would be about. Even so, I couldn't be more excited. At this point I'd already played Don't Starve, Mark of the Ninja and Invisible Ink. Klei had proven themselves to be a relatively small studio that punches well above its weight, and I knew that they had the ability to create unique, genre-defying games that are fantastic to play. They also had a really good track record with early access. I actually made a video about Klei's unique approach to game design and why they've been so successful in making extremely popular games, even though they are constantly entering new genres. If you're interested, I'll link this video in the description below. But back to Oxygen Not Included, needless to say, I bought it the day it launched into early access. Even though the original early access release was a far cry from the game ONI is today, I was already in love with the concept. It was clear from the start that this was a different kind of survival game, one that doesn't pull any punches and expects its player base to be as committed as the development team. Don't be fooled by the cute, light-hearted art style, because this is as hardcore as colony management games get. I've been wanting to do an in-depth review of ONI since I started this channel. I also find it fascinating that such a popular game that has just launched its latest DLC out of early access has so few reviews done on it. Fascinating, but not at all surprising. Personally, I feel some pressure with this one because this is a huge game and it seems nearly impossible to do it justice. My guess is most reviewers don't want to do reviews on it after all these years, because if the base game wasn't already complex enough, with the DLC added, you could play it for dozens of hours and barely scratch the surface of what it has to offer. I guess you could argue that this makes it difficult for a reviewer to give good buying advice to potential new players, although that probably doesn't matter as much as you'd think. The reality is that these days a lot of people, myself included, don't watch review videos because they want to make an informed buying decision. My guess is that if you've clicked on this video, there's a good chance that you've bought and played ONI already. If you're anything like me, you already love this game and you're just looking for a community where you can see what other people's experiences have been and share your own. So in some ways, I'm going to treat this as a discussion as much as I'll treat it as a review. If you haven't played it yet, don't worry, because I will give you a pretty good idea of what to expect. The first thing you need to know is that for me, this is one of my most played games of all time. It has infinite replayability and it is an absolute masterclass in emergent gameplay. No two playthroughs are alike. The second thing you need to know is that it's not for everyone. The complexity comes at a price, and ONI doesn't have a learning curve as much as it is a learning cliff. ONI is loosely based on real scientific principles, albeit with a lot of creative license, and from there the game throws in tons of fiction to create deep systems-based gameplay. I can't talk about this game without talking about Andy Weir's books. Much like The Martian or Project Hail Mary, ONI is aimed squarely at people who have a love for science fiction and creative problem solving. If you're wondering if you should buy this game, or for those of you that already have it, wondering if you should give it another go, you can ask yourself the following questions. Question 1. Are you comfortable with logic and numbers? For a game this complex, ONI has an incredibly good user interface. The thing is though, it does not hold your hand. The game lets you decide which resources you'd like to track, and it expects that the player is intelligent enough to figure this out over time. How many tons of algae do you have? How much are you using per day to generate oxygen? In the absence of an alternative plan, your total algae divided by the amount you're using to generate oxygen per day will tell you how many days you have left before your dupes suffocate and die. How much coal are you burning every day? Is it possible to offset that amount by ranching hatches to create a sustainable power source? If not, how can you supplement it? If this sounds like your idea of fun, well, then you're well on your way. Question 2. Are you motivated by processes or by rewards? ONI is not really a game that's going to pat you on the back for doing a good job. Sure, it has built-in achievements, but the reason most players enjoy this game is the challenge itself. You can spend hours planning out and building a new system for your base, perhaps one that'll help you solve a power problem, or perhaps one that can increase your food or oxygen supply. Now that you've solved that power problem, you can finally build that electrolyzer that'll help you to create a more sustainable oxygen supply. After spending another hour building out an electrolyzer setup with vents to distribute oxygen around your base, you realize that this is continuously increasing the heat in your base. It's now only a matter of time before the conditions for your farm are no longer good enough to support plant growth. How will you get around this? Perhaps you'll find some way of dealing with the heat, or perhaps you'll set up a completely new food supply. The fun lies in trying to solve these challenges, and there are definitely moments where you will feel immense satisfaction because you've come up with an ingenious solution to a problem. These can be incredibly rewarding. Don't dwell on it for too long though, there's always more you can do, and as you continue playing, you'll find that your thinking starts shifting from what you'd like to achieve in the next 10 cycles to what you'd like to achieve in the next 100 and beyond. ONI is about the journey, not the destination. Question 3. Are you comfortable with failure? ONI doesn't just encourage failure, it demands it. As much information as the game throws at you, it is still not enough. You didn't realize that the petroleum generator will throw polluted water next to it on the ground? Well, tough luck. Now you have a stream of polluted water running towards the ladder where it will drop right down into your clean water supply. Does it bother you that some unbreathable chlorine, natural gas, and hydrogen has been making its way into your base and is now mixing with your breathable oxygen supply? You may as well get over it. We probably breathe much dirtier air in real life, and your dupes probably have bigger problems to worry about. Maybe you're a perfectionist though, so you'll spend countless cycles building perfect airlocks and making sure every gas is where it should be. Only thing is, while you were doing that, you didn't realize that you'd run out of clean water. Now your farms are dead, the oxidizer has stopped producing oxygen, and some crazy dupe is running around smashing your buildings because he's having a mental breakdown. Time to start a new colony, because this one's about to die. The reality is that irrespective of whether you've played ONI for 2 hours or 200 hours, there are some things that you simply can't learn without failing at them first. Sometimes it'll be because you didn't quite understand how a particular building works. Other times you understand perfectly well, but your actions lead to a chain reaction of events that no reasonable person could possibly predict. Sometimes you'll get your head down and solve the problem. Other times you'll rage quit and give it a few days or months before giving it another go. I could go on, but I think you're starting to get the idea. If you like logic and science, if you're intrinsically motivated by processes and problem solving, and you embrace failure as part of it all, you will love ONI. If, on the other hand, that sounds like your idea of hell, well, that's okay too. This is a great game, but it's definitely not for everyone. So there's a lot more to talk about, but I think at this point you should have a pretty good idea if ONI is something you'd enjoy. One thing to keep in mind, if you're a new player, it's probably best to start with the DLC deactivated. I want to get to my next point, so I'm not going to give a lot of tips for new players, but I did recently do a short video with basic tips, so if you're interested, do check that out in the description below. So let's talk about where ONI is today, the full package with the spaced out DLC included. Much like the base game, I'm a huge fan of the DLC. The smaller asteroids solved one of the biggest problems I had with the base game. I always felt that the pacing was a little bit slow, especially because you had to spend so much time digging towards the top of the asteroid in order to build your first rocket. The smaller asteroids mean that even without transit tubes or fireman poles, you can get to the surface and start building rockets much faster. Based on the Steam achievements, about 4% of players will reach the point where they actually launch a rocket. As for how many actually manage to land a dupe on another asteroid and build a landing pad there, well, that is 0.5%. This does not surprise me at all, and considering just how hard ONI can be, I'm even surprised that 4% of players manage to launch rockets in the first place. Part of the reason for this is that you have to master so many different systems in the game before you'll even have the tech and materials required to build rockets. That part I'm perfectly fine with, but there are other reasons as well. Now it's at this point where I have to start introducing some balance to this review and talk about some aspects of ONI where there's room for improvement. First off, the game does a terrible job onboarding new players. There are a few built-in tutorial tips and videos right at the start of the game, but beyond that you're expected to read the in-game guide. The thing is that the in-game guide contains a fraction of what you'll need to know to be successful in ONI. I don't expect that the game has to explain to you the consequences of every action that you take and how this is going to impact the systems that you have in your base. However, at the very least, it should explain exactly how each building works. This is a hard fail for ONI because there are lots of basic little nuanced details which the game just completely neglects to explain. Take the steam generator for example. The game tells you that it has an overheat temperature of 1000 degrees Celsius. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this building will operate perfectly fine below that threshold, but you'd be wrong. It actually stops operating at 100 degrees Celsius, a number that isn't mentioned anywhere in the game. At the time of making this video, the only way you could find this information is by either testing it until you run into the limitation or by looking it up on the wiki. This could have easily been explained by having just one picture or diagram showing the most basic setup for each building. If the devs really wanted to go the extra mile, they could even have little tutorials showing how each building works. The problem isn't that the game doesn't do this, it's that it does, but it's so inconsistent in its application. Some things are explained, some things aren't. In some cases, information that's available in the build menu isn't available in the database and vice versa. This problem becomes exponentially bigger the further you get into the game, and by the time you reach rockets, things are basically not explained at all. Klei have clearly embraced the fact that the community will maintain wikis, forums, and YouTube videos that will explain everything, so they don't need to do it. I like challenging games that don't hold the player's hand, but ONI goes well beyond that. At times the game just seems completely obtuse. I want to make it clear that this is by no means a deal breaker, and it ceases to be an issue once you figure out how something works. Even so, as one of Klei and ONI's biggest fans, I'd be lying if I said that this won't put off at least some new players. This brings me to my next and biggest criticism that I have of ONI, which is the AI. It's not that the AI is bad. In fact, all things considered, I think the devs did an incredible job. It's just that the AI can't keep up with the complexity of the game. Trust me, if you've played this game and you've never once reached a point where you rage quit, you either have godlike patience or you just haven't played the game for long enough yet. Even if you understand exactly which skills to give your dupes and you have the best possible priority set up, you will see situations where dupes are going about things in extremely inefficient ways. I would have loved it if you could just plan out entire rooms and rely on the dupes to build them. I love the fact that you get these transparent sketches that create the distinct impression that you're looking at the technical drawings of an inventor or engineer when you place building plans. The problem is that in 90% of cases, you will need to be very careful about the order in which you build things. There are thousands of things that could go wrong, often resulting in your dupes being stranded, liquids or gases going where they shouldn't, or in the worst cases, dupes dying. Now, as I said, I don't blame the developers for this. I can only imagine how complex the set of rules governing the AI must be in a game that has so much complexity to navigate. However, this does get very frustrating once you reach rockets, because between the complete lack of guidance and the endless unexpected behaviors from dupes, you can expect hours of reloads and experimentation before you'll so much as set foot on another asteroid. So there's no doubt that the game isn't perfect, but I don't think perfection is a realistic goal for a game like this. I can forgive ONI for these flaws. It's a side effect of building something that fully embraces systems and emergent gameplay. You have to take the bad with the good in this case. Besides, there's nothing in this world that I truly love that doesn't come with a few flaws to give it some character. The reality is that as an emergent problem-solving simulator, ONI is second to none. This is as good as it gets. For a science fiction game, ONI is surprisingly good at teaching us skills and lessons about the real world. It will test and improve your attention to detail, logic, determination, grit, creativity, problem-solving skills, and patience, to name but a few. If you've ever managed a project in the real world, you'll know that even with the most meticulous planning, there will always be surprises and problems along the way. Sometimes these problems seem obvious in hindsight, other times they do not, but either way, it illustrates the huge difference between theory and practical application. No plan survives contact with reality. In all of this, I should point out that ONI never feels unfair. The game is always consistent with its rules, and after years of updates and improvements, it is incredibly well balanced, especially considering the sheer depth and complexity of its various systems. Whenever I mess something up, I eventually figure out where I went wrong. I love that ONI keeps me honest in this way. It's a brilliant reminder that we're all idiots in our own way, and that success doesn't come from always being right, but rather from not being afraid to make mistakes, fail, and admit that being wrong sometimes is probably the only way to ensure continued learning and progress. So here's my final verdict on ONI. ONI is a masterpiece, one that is very much an acquired taste that few will ever be able to fully appreciate. For those that do master it, that are willing to endure the tough challenges and setbacks along the way, it will reward with endless creative problem solving and replay value. As far as intellectual engagement goes, games don't get much better than this. If you've watched this video all the way up to this point, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you played ONI, and if so, what has your experience been? As always, if you like this content and you'd like to see more, do like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next video.